Here in Germany, the far-right AfD is celebrating their first major breakthrough in the country's west. The AfD party, that's the blue bar in the graph, nearly tripled their share with almost 15% in municipal elections in Germany's most populous state, North Rhine Westphalia. It's the AfD's largest ever win in Germany's west. The party has made historic gains in recent years, becoming the second strongest political force at the national level. Chancellor Merz's Christian Democrats won the municipal and local elections with a third of the vote. These elections are seen as a first test for Merz's government. And we can now bring in Katja, historian, author and visiting research fellow at King's College London, who's done extensive research on extremism. Katja, the AfD have only been able to achieve election results of 20 or 30% in eastern Germany up until now. How much of a success is this actually for the AfD, keeping in mind, of course, these were local elections?
Well, it got over 20% in the last national election as well. So we've already seen some inroads that they've made in Western Germany as well. But I think what's significant here is that this area of North Rhine Westphalia is traditionally an SPD stronghold. So basically a centre-left stronghold, and an area where many working class people live that's traditionally been sort of heavy industry. And to basically get, 3 times the result that they did last time in an area like that means that there's a new quality, I think, to their followership, because they're breaking into a group of people that have traditionally voted left-wing.
Now, is this just a protest vote anymore, or how is the AfD so adept at attracting people's votes?
Well, I think the word protest vote is a bit difficult to define because, it means that people are basically not voting for something but against something else. And I think for that reason, it's partially applicable here in the sense that people are disaffected with the traditional parties and are therefore voting for the AfD. But I think it's not just a question of, anyone else will do. I think they're also drawn to the AfD because of their policies on migration. I think that's the single biggest issue, particularly also in the cities in North Rhine-Westphalia.
Now, especially with regard to migration, Friedrich Merz Conservatives have moved to the right in response to recent successes of the AfD. Why is that not enough to stop the AfD's surge?
Well, the CDU's results were actually reasonably stable compared to last time. They've lost a little bit, but not as much as the SPD or the Greens. So there's an argument there that some people are trusting them on this issue. But I think locally people don't see enough action. So there are some cities, and you hear this a lot from local politicians and activists in this area, where it's become incredibly messy and dirty, the surroundings, people not using kind of refuse collection and these kinds of things enough. And where local politicians have been quite strict on this, Duisburg is an example where the SPD mayor got nearly half the vote, as a single person, back despite being in the SPD. That's because he's quite strict on these issues and actually also quite critical of the federal SPD. So I think where people see action in their surroundings on this, they are willing to trust the traditional parties, but where they don't, they turn to the AfD to show the other parties that they are still unhappy about this.
Now, the AfD surge is also a part of a wider international phenomenon that we're seeing. Is this a wider political shift across the West, if you want to call it that, that is gaining increasing momentum and that will just not go away?
I think it is. I mean, myself and other people have said for a long time that this focus on East Germany within the discussion hasn't been particularly helpful, simply because this is, as you say, an international trend. And when you look at France or Austria or Britain or the US, we see very similar movements among similar types of voters as well. And I think, if anything, Western Germany was the outlier. They're sticking with traditional parties for longer than most other Western countries. And I think we're just beginning to see this area to catch up on a global trend.
Now, in May, the Domestic Intelligence Agency had labelled the AfD as far-right extremist, and that classification has been paused pending a legal challenge, but it doesn't seem to stop the voters to vote for them.
No, and I think partially that's because a lot of the statements that have been collected to try and prove that the AfD is far right were publicly available. So to most voters, I don't think that's news as such. I think most of these kind of statements and positions were well known. So for the sort of official domestic security agency to say that they are far right and that they're saying these things, I don't think many people were particularly surprised by that. As we just said, it is in large part still a protest vote. And I think for that reason, people don't really care, I think, to be honest, just how extreme the party may be, because it is basically a desperate attempt to try and break out of the status quo. And if that means voting for an extremist party, then a lot of people will do that.
The historian and journalist Katja Hoyer there. Thank you very much, Katja.
Thank you.
Here in Germany, Chancellor Merz's Christian Democrats have won local elections in Germany's most populous state. Some 14 million residents in North Rhine Westphalia were eligible to elect mayors and other local leaders. Voter turnout topped 56%, a little higher than 5 years ago. The state's mix of university cities, post-industrial towns, and farmland make it a political bellwether for Germany. Let's take a look at the preliminary results now. Chancellor Merz's Conservative CDU party came in first with a third of the vote, followed by the center-left SPD with 22%. The far-right AfD, that's the blue bar, nearly tripled their share with almost 15%. The Greens were the big losers, down nearly 7% from the last vote. Now let's get more on this now from DW's correspondent Matthew Moore. Matthew, the far-right AfD has tripled its support in the state. What does this mean for the party and for German politics in general?
I mean, the AfD are describing this result here as a major success, Terry. And that's partly because we know that their stronghold is in the east of the former east of Germany. And now what they're doing is they're kind of building that, solidifying, if you like, that support in the west, which is really important for this party. Remember, this is a party that is suspected by authorities here, the intelligence services here, of being a right-wing extremist party. And that really has made it hard for the party to break through in the former west, despite the fact that it does have lots of members there. And so this result really for them, although on the face of it, it's just 16%, it doesn't look remarkable. But as you mentioned, it's tripling the result from the last election. And for them, it is just, again, a sign and a message really to the rest of Germany. Look, we're not going anywhere. And if anything, we're building out our support in the West. So it's really, for the AfD, it's really important, and it sends a signal to the rest of the parties.
Now, North Rhine Westphalia is Germany's most populous state, so this election was seen as something of a test for the government of Chancellor Friedrich Merz. His Conservative CDU party did come in first with 34%, but that's a little less than in the previous election. Does the CDU still see this as a success?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because on the one hand, it was seen as a kind of a test of the new government, and the kind of the political weather in recent months and years has been that the parties of the centre, the Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats, have lost support over the years in elections. Now, the Christian Democrats, they did win the election. They've lost a percentage or so. This was for the head of the state there, the state premier, Hendrik Wüst. He basically said last night, in responding to the result, centre-right parties across Europe would kill for polling for numbers like this, 30+%. But on the other hand, he's also acknowledged the fact that the AfD's success in this election really is a cause for concern, and is a wake-up call to the parties there in North Rhine Westphalia to really look at what has gone wrong in government, in local government over recent decades, and try to solve those problems. Clearly, the voters are sending a message to political parties. Something is not working here. And so he acknowledged that in his remarks last night. But as you say, it will be a sigh of relief for the government here in Berlin, because it could have been worse for them.
Now, the centre-left Social Democrats used to be the strongest party in North Rhine-Westphalia. They were that for decades. The SPD used to get well over 50% of the vote there. Given their defeat by the Conservatives in this election and their poor showing at a federal level, do they have a political future?
It's the big question, isn't it? I mean, like last night, the party was kind of trying to put a brave face on this result. The Social Democrats, as you mentioned, this was a place where this was their heartlands, really, the industrial heartlands for this party. They could count on a lot of working class voters there. That has been really dealt a blow by parties like the AfD. And last night, the co-leader of the Social Democrats said, look, this is not a disaster. But I'm not sure many people will believe that she really believes that herself. And it does put a big question over the Social Democrats. Where can they where can they win support in the future? So a big test for the Social Democrats now in the next 3 or 4 years to see how they can somehow fight back and see if there is a future for that party.
Matthew, thank you very much. Our correspondent, Matthew Moore.